Hi, first graders. So this week we're switching from data and we are going to practice fractions. Now, I remember you guys had a lot of fun with this last time we did it, way back in around Christmas time, probably. We talked about desserts and we talked about, the brownie and if we're sharing the brownie, how to make equal parts. And so last time we really focused on that equal parts section of fractions. And we talked about if I have something, how do I cut it into equal shares or equal parts? You have the whole thing and you want it to be equal on both sides, right? And we talked about that a lot. And you guys did fantastic with that. And so right now, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to review equal parts just so that you remember it. But then we're going to talk about halves because that's the first part of fractions we're going to work on this week. And then I'm going to give you a chance to practice halves and making halves and identifying halves and all that stuff. Okay, so first things first is let's go back over equal shares really quickly. I'm going to make myself small. Okay, so over here, you can see we've got these shapes. Okay, and so first I just want to talk about equal shares. So if I was going to make this square into equal parts, you would want to think about if I'm sharing this and it's a pan of brownies and I'm sharing it with you, would it be fair if I gave you, that's not a straight line, but if I gave you this side and I ate that side, would that be fair? Think about that. No, you wouldn't want this skinny little side, would you? You would want the big side of the brownie. So it's not fair because we wouldn't be getting the same thing, right? So when we're doing equal parts, you want to make sure that you make sure both sides are the exact same. They're equal. They would be fair. Now, mine's not going to be perfect. That's still a little off, but you see what I'm saying, like down the middle, right? And another way to do equal shares on a square would be diagonal like that. You could see both triangles would be the same size over here, equal shares, right? I get a share, you get a share, but they would be equal. And my half and your half together would make the whole. And then we also talked about, even if there's more pieces, like let's say there's 4 of us sharing it, all 4 of these pieces have to be the same, or we would cut it again this way if we did that, right? Now let's talk about down here. Let's say I had cut it halfway like this, and then I said, okay, now I need to cut it into 4s. Whoa, would those be equal shares? No. See how this piece is way bigger? You need to make sure however you cut it, your pieces all look the same. All right, so that was just talking about equal shares. You guys are really good at that. It makes sense, which is why you guys are good at it, because, you can easily say, well, it wouldn't be fair if I had to get the small piece of the brownie. That part makes sense to you. So that part's pretty easy. So today we're going to be talking about the whole and talking about halves. Okay, so look up here on my page. And you can see this circle right here, that's the whole. It's the whole thing. The whole pie, the whole pan of brownies, the whole pizza, whatever you want to think of it as, that's the whole thing, right? And what you do is when you have halves, you make 2 equal shares. Okay, so we've got 1 whole, but when you cut it in half, see their line, then there's 2 halves. Okay, so 2 equal shares together make the whole, and here you can see the 2 equal shares. Now let's think about this question. Is half of the circle larger or smaller than the whole circle? Think about that. Half of the circle, so that would be this half over here, right? Is that larger than the whole or is that smaller? It's smaller, right? And that's easy to see. It's half, it's smaller, so you can think about each part is smaller than the whole altogether because you're taking the whole and you're breaking it into parts. So each part is going to be smaller. All right, so then down here you could draw halves, draw a line to show halves. You could do it this way. You could do it this way. Diagonal, maybe diagonal the other way. Kind of deal. So those would be halves, right? Right. All right, let's move on. So over here you would now see, sorry, let me just erase some of these lines, some different kinds of shapes and the way that they've got halves. So let's think about these as we go through. Does this shape represent halves? Think about it. Yep, see how it's got 1 line in the middle, 2 equal parts that go together to make the whole, and like I said, they're equal. Now, does this one equal halves, show halves? Think about it. No, right? If you're thinking no, then you're right, because it does have 2 parts, like shapes with halves, but this part is way skinnier than this part. I wouldn't want to eat this brownie. I'd want this brownie because it's bigger, which means they're not equal. So that doesn't show halves. Look at number 7. That one shows halves, right? Because it's pretty equal. Most of these other ones, they show halves. Oh, that one's not equal, right? So down here, we can see that this picture shows 2 halves. See how this is 1/2, 2 halves, 2 halves. And we know that the 2 equal shares, because there's 2 equal parts, make 1 whole. Okay, and it's important for us to be able to use those words. The halves, 2 equal shares, together make 1 whole. Okay? All right, let's just erase down here and move on to the next page. Just see if there's anything else I want to review. Okay, let's go through these really quick. So, color half of each of the shapes. So if I was going to color half of this circle, would I color the whole thing? Would it matter which side I colored? Think about that for a second. Yeah, if you're thinking that I'd color half of it, and it wouldn't matter which half, I could color this side or I could color the other half, you'd be right. And so it'd be the same thing with I could color the top or I could color the bottom, but coloring half would just be half of the shape like this, 1 of the equal parts. Let's talk about this one. Linus cuts a circle into equal shares and he traces 1 of the parts. Write half of or halves to name the parts. Okay, so this is what of a circle? Is that the whole circle? No, that's half of the circle, right? So you could write half of the circle, or we write fractions like this, 1/2, which means 1/2. 1 out of the 2 parts. Think about that. The bottom, which we call the denominator, that means there's 2 parts. The top shows us how many parts we're talking about. We're only talking about 1, so that's 1/2. Okay, this would be different ways to show halves. Remember we talked about this way, and with the rectangles and squares, you can do diagonal. Okay? All right. Now, we are going to move on to practicing. So today for practicing, you are going to get onto IXL. And when you go to IXL, remember we click on first grade. And right now, I still have graphing starred, but next week when you get on here, you'll be able to see that fractions are starred. So let's find it down here. Okay, so you can see data and graphs are starred from last week, but when you get on, you'll see that fractions, which is x, are starred. Now, I'm not going to start all of them at first because I want you to practice on just a couple of these. Okay, so let's talk about equal parts first. We'll practice a couple and then we'll go back. So, equal parts. Let's wait for this to load. Okay, and it says select the picture that shows equal parts. Think about which one it is. Remember, all the parts would have to be equal. It's this one. Look at how skinny and different size those are. It's clearly that one in the middle, right? Again, equal parts. Got it? Yeah, if you're saying this blue square, you'd be right. Equal parts. All right? Now, this one's a little trickier because it's not halves. Look, those 2 parts aren't equal. Those 2 parts aren't equal, but look at this one. All 4 of those are equal. So yeah, that would be correct. Great job. All right, so then you can click on math and go back. Once you feel like you've got it with equal parts, then I want you to move on to halves. Okay, so we're going to start with identify halves. So which figure shows halves? Well, you'd have to find the one that's equal parts, which would be this one down the middle, right? Which picture shows halves? And if you think easy peasy and you need it to be a little more challenging, you're welcome to move on to some of the unstarred ones. But I'd like you to make sure you know halves and all of that. Which shape shows 1/2? Let's see, all of them have 1 colored in. But which one has 2 pieces? Because that's what we talk about with halves. So let's see, this one's got 4, 3. Oh, there it is. If you're thinking the blue square, 2 pieces. One of them's colored in. That shows 1/2, 1/2. Right? So these shapes shows 1/2. Yeah, were you thinking the orange circle? Yeah, 1/2 right there. You got it. Good job. Okay, now on here, you don't have to go until you get a score of 100. That kind of takes a long time. You know what I mean? Just maybe there's a little timer right here. How much time you want to spend 10, 15 minutes on IXL practicing, and then we'll practice a little bit more tomorrow. Okay, so like I said, if you want to keep going, If you want to keep going on the fraction skills on here, or if later in the week I don't assign IXL, but you want to make sure this is your favorite way of practicing, then come back, because I want you to be able to practice. I want you to be able to practice all of these. Okay. So like, let's talk about, and the other one I'm going to do is make halves right here. And we're going to talk about, like I said, that one, oh, hang on. That 1/2. Okay, so this one you have to actually draw it. Connect 2 dots to make a cut. You want to cut it into halves, so you could do this dot to this dot, right? Or you could do this dot to this dot, halves. Okay, and they'll give you a couple different kinds of shapes to do. There's the circle. Connect the 2 dots to make halves. Let's see if we can jump to a harder one. This one's got, you could do it's got the corners. Ooh, cut the rectangle into halves. Now don't be fooled, because look, if I do that, is that halves? Those aren't equal parts. So let's take that back. Let's do the one in the middle. Halves, right? Yep. All right. Okay, so I hope that you have fun practicing fractions this week.